The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest stories in the NBA.
Coming up, the Nets trade for Kobe Bufkin. That's right.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast.
Another Nets trade, continuing what has been a wild offseason. Brooklyn acquires Kobe Bufkin from the Atlanta Hawks today for cash considerations. And my initial reaction to the trade is this is Sean Marks addressing a really pressing need on the Nets roster for another young point guard. We all know that's really what Brooklyn needed, was another young point guard after drafting 3 in the first round this year. Just kidding. Obviously, that is not a pressing need for the Nets team. But my actual reaction to this deal is I think it's an interesting flyer for the Nets, and it follows, a pattern, a way that they should be conducting their business, entering or being into this rebuild. Same kind of strategy they took throughout their first rebuild with Sean Marks, and that's taking flyers on, players who had past pedigree, players who, were high upside guys or perceivably that in their past. And that's what they get with Kobe Bufkin. This is a guy who was the number 15 pick in the 2023 draft out of Michigan. I remember liking him going into that draft. I mean, if you watch his tape at Michigan, he showed some really high-level driving ability during his sophomore season as a guy with the ball in his hands, a lead ball handler. He, really showed that he could get downhill with a quick first step, had a variety of, pretty crafty off-the-dribble moves. He shot 70% at the rim or over 70% at the rim, and he improved as a three-point shooter, during that campaign. He shot in the mid-30s. He flashed some, defensive capabilities. He does have really good size at point guard at 6'5", with a 6'8" wingspan. And because of that, I remember I looked back after this trade broke at some of the things I had written leading up to that draft. And there were a lot of people who had Bufkin, mocked in the late lottery as high as number like 9 or 10. He was really in that 10 to 15 range. Then he ended up falling to 15 during the draft. But if you're trying to get an evaluation of him as a player and what he could be for this Nets team, it's pretty difficult because he just hasn't played much basketball since joining the league. He had a thumb injury during his rookie season and obviously just wasn't really ready to play NBA minutes. He only played in 17 NBA games that year and then had 14 G League appearances. And then this past season, he played in 10 games at the beginning of the year before having season-ending shoulder surgery in December. So he was an intriguing prospect coming out of the draft, and there were a lot of people who liked him and thought that he would be a rotation piece for the Hawks, and it just didn't work out that way. Some, because of injuries, and then obviously he just didn't develop the way that the Hawks hoped he would in terms of when he did play, the scoring efficiency really wasn't there. He is a guy who, while he has good size from a height perspective, needs to add some weight to his frame, and he did struggle, finishing at the rim in his limited opportunities. He struggled as a three-point shooter, and obviously Atlanta wasn't too high on his capabilities because they just traded him for literally nothing but financial flexibility. Bufkin has a $6.9 million team option in 2026-27 that the Hawks were going to decline. And by doing this and trading him for cash considerations, they're creating a lot more room below the luxury tax. And that's important because they're going to have to extend guys like Dyson Daniels and Kristaps Porzingis. And if you look at their guard rotation this season, they obviously already have Trae Young. They have Dyson Daniels. They got Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Luke Kennard this offseason. So they're really didn't seem like there was going to be a place for Bufkin. And obviously Atlanta decided that he wasn't going to be a player that was going to make an impact or that they felt had a ceiling, long-term for them where he was going to be a rotation caliber piece. And, the Nets take advantage somewhat of their position, as a team, the only team left in the NBA with cap space because Bufkin's making a little bit over $4 million this season. And you'd think, there are still teams who could acquire him. They could trade other players for him. They could bring him into exceptions. And you would think if there were other teams who were high on him as a player, that somebody would have maybe been able to give up a second-round pick or something along those lines for him. So it doesn't really seem like he had a market whatsoever. And the Nets are able to get him for free. So I think from that perspective, it's a good trade for the Nets. You're not giving up anything. You're taking a player who has some past pedigree. I like, in college what Bufkin showed offensively, and he just hasn't been able to carry it over to the NBA since then. But getting him for free, we'll see what he can do. And he should be a player who should get some opportunities for the Nets this season, similar to what you saw the Nets do like with a guy like Zaire Williams last year. A guy who was a former lottery pick. He was cast off, didn't catch on during his time with Memphis, although he played more than Bufkin did and was there longer. But the Nets get him as a salary dump. They get a second-round pick alongside him. And he had a good year last year, and then he gets a contract extension with the Nets, and they'll have an extended runway to see what he can be. We'll see if, Bufkin can show similar flashes, if he can be a guy who warrants another opportunity. But even if not, the Nets are no worse off for wear, and we'll see what he can do, in a guard rotation that is just absolutely stacked right now. Reacting to Brooklyn's acquisition of Kobe Bufkin from the Atlanta Hawks. That's another young point guard coming to this Nets roster. Bufkin, a little, almost 22 years old, so still in that younger range, part of that 2023 draft class. And this move, obviously, I made a joke at the beginning of this podcast because this trade is off the heels of the Nets just making headlines and some people almost making fun of them for taking 3 international point guards in the first round of this year's draft in Yegor Dioman, Nolan Traore, and Ben Saraf. Now they add Bufkin to the mix. They also obviously have Cam Thomas, at least for now, after he signed his 1-year, $6 million qualifying offer. So it's a very crowded guard rotation. It's a crowded Nets roster overall, which I'm going to get to in a little bit. But just focusing on the guard rotation, I do think that this will impact, the way that the Nets point guard rotation, especially for these rookies, plays out throughout the year somewhat, because I do think that they're going to want to get a look at Bufkin. I mean, this is a guy who, as I said, has a $6.9 million team option next season. Whether the Nets pick that up, whether they decline him, they obviously saw something in him where they thought that it made sense to bring him in, even though they gave up nothing for him but cash considerations. If they didn't think that he had any potential, they wouldn't have traded for him. So they bring him into the mix. You have a little bit, obviously, of a clock on your decision for him, and you need to make that decision sooner than some of these rookie point guards. Those guys are developmental guys. You're going to have them down the line. And while Bufkin is that too, he has that team option next season. So this is similar to the Zaire Williams situation, I think, where they bring him in. And, I think Bufkin maybe doesn't have that expansive of a role next season, but I think he will have a role, and he's a guy that they're going to want to get minutes. So, it's going to affect these other guys. And I've said, Yegor Dioman, I think, is going to be the Nets starting point guard. I don't think there's really any question about that. I think Nolan Traore will have a rotation role from day one as a guy who comes in off the bench as the Nets point guard in the second unit, and also can play in the first unit when Dioman, slides down to the 2 or down to the wing. I've said that I think that Ben Saraf is the guy of those 3 point guards, and then also Danny Wolf, not a point guard, but another guy at the end of that Nets draft class that I think will spend some time in the G League to begin the year. So that's kind of how I see this playing out. I think the Nets have used Long Island as a tool to develop players in the past. You look at guys like, obviously, Noah Clowney spent some time down there, Nick Claxton, any of the Nets draft picks for the most part have spent some time in Long Island. Tariq Whitehead's been there. So I would expect that guys like Saraf and Wolf, Saraf particularly because we're talking about the point guard rotation down there, at the beginning of the year, I think we'll spend some time in Long Island. I think that he'll get minutes in the NBA as well. But adding Bufkin to the mix now, this is just another guy that you're going to want to at least see what he has, and you're going to want to, feature him at least to understand whether or not you're going to want to pick up that team option or whether he has potential to earn another deal down the line. So it's just a really crowded, Nets backcourt rotation at this point. And, it's also just a really crowded Nets roster, in general. You look at this now, the Nets made another move today, signing David Muoka. Most of you probably don't know who that is, but he played for the Nets G League team in 2023-24, young center. But point is they signed him, and if you include the unofficial signings of Fambo Zhang and Ricky Council, and now this Kobe Bufkin trade, the Nets have 24 players under contract, and that's well over what you're allowed to carry. You're only allowed to have 21 players under contract during the offseason and at training camp. The reason that they have it right now is because the Bufkin trade has not been made official yet. The Fambo Zhang signing and the Ricky Council signing, none of those have been made official yet. But the Nets are going to have to get off 3 more players ahead of the start of the regular season, and they obviously have several guys on partially or non-guaranteed contracts. When you look at Keon Johnson, you look at Jalen Wilson, Tyrese Martin, Drew Timme as well. So there's going to be more roster moves.
The NFL season is finally here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet. Player props, same-game parlays, jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, easy, and the best way to avoid your malaise on a Sunday when your team's not on. Add a little more energy to your Sunday. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
Yo, we got new developments in the Jonathan Kuminga Warriors staring contest that's been going on all summer. It doesn't appear to be money-driven right now for Jonathan Kuminga. Late last week, Mike Dunleavy offered Kuminga a 3-year, and this is all reported by ESPN, a 3-year, $75.2 million deal with a team option in the third season. So it was 1+1 at about an average of $24 million per year in that first deal. This one is 2+1 at an average of just about $25 million per year, which is the same as the fellow restricted free agent, Josh Giddey, who just received that amount with the Bulls. The difference is he has 4 years. They're committed to Josh Giddey, while Kuminga's deal is half of that of guaranteed. And there's a subliminal understanding that the contract is more a trade asset than any sort of a commitment to a partnership. And that's where that question, do you want to be here? Do you even want me here? No one knows what the other side wants here because the offers were made. First of all, let's start with that $75.2 million deal. 2 years of guaranteed money. That's $48.3 million guaranteed throughout the first 2 seasons. The qualifying offer is worth $8 million. Think of all that money you are leaving on the table and leaving it to chance. And look, Kuminga's a good enough player to where likely he'll make some amount of money and it won't be a big deal, even if he does lose some of that throughout the remainder of his career. But extensions only come around so often, and you don't know where the market of the NBA is, where teams sit. And look, that's a lot of money, $48.3 million. You take that, you run it over to your financial advisor, you say, throw this in some high yield savings account. You don't even need risk attached, and you're set for life. $8 million's not doing that. It's just not. So Kuminga, why do you not accept that offer? And the unwillingness to accept that offer comes from the fact that it's that team option. It's a team option. If they went 2 plus the player option, there's no holdup. So we think. That's what it sounds like here. Warriors aren't doing that, though. They've made it clear that they're not doing that. So how about 2 years, $48 million, just guaranteed? I don't know if that sounds more enticing to Kuminga. Just 2 years, $48 million. Would that get it done? 2 years, $50 million. Would that get it done? How does it affect the apron purposes this late in the offseason where you have to pick up some players? There's a lot of moving parts here, but no commitment to a partnership is what we've heard for a long time now, that the Warriors, and at first it was really Kuminga, that Kuminga wasn't necessarily interested in sticking around. And then that's when we kind of heard from the Warriors side of things. But we knew that this has been a rocky relationship in terms of basketball fit for a while. It doesn't seem like from the human being aspect there's any ill will. It seems like Lacob and Kuminga are cool. It seems like for the most part Kuminga and Steve Kerr, minus coaching decisions, are cool for the most part. It's amicable. It's just a commitment that they can't each commit to right now. The Warriors are like, hey, forget about the fact that you may be traded this or that. Like, do you want the guaranteed money or not? We've upped the offer to 2 years guaranteed now, plus the 1 tradable contract. Do you want that? And here's how they said, instead of the qualifying offer, instead of taking the $8 million qualifying offer, here's the alternative that we're going to go with here. 1 year on a negotiable number. I would imagine that number was probably like 26 million something, a ballooned version of the qualifying offer, basically, where it was 1 year. Kuminga gets his financial bump. He gets unrestricted free agency, which it sounds like he wants if he's seriously considering the qualifying offer. It sounds like the freedom to choose where he goes and find out where his career takes him with his terms and his terms only sounds more enticing than 48 million guaranteed if it means there's some parts in there that he can't control. So he wants control badly, clearly. wants control. And this, the Warriors no trade clause that is built into that qualifying offer, so they can trade him. And if it's $28 million, then you're talking a pretty nice player that you can return, or a pretty nice, really nice player if you throw in some form of a package. You could get up with Moses Moody, you could potentially get up to like $40 million or something along those lines if you used him as an expiring contract at the deadline. Remember how important those expiring contracts were last year. Dennis Schroeder was one of the main reasons that you were able to land Jimmy Butler. He was making $13 million. Imagine 28 from Jonathan Kuminga, 24, whatever the number had to be to make sense. And Dunleavy declined that concept, the sources said. Lacob was against the ballooned one-year offer. So, and apparently he was against it because it left the Warriors too vulnerable to lose Kuminga for nothing. We're not still at this point, right? We got 15 days, less than 15 days until camp begins. There's 9 players on the frickin' roster. You need Jonathan Kuminga to some degree. He holds some leverage. He may even hold more leverage than the Warriors. It's very even right now, I would think. But if Kuminga doesn't care about $40 million, then there's no leverage. The Warriors have no leverage. He'll just take the qualifying offer. I don't know if he was wearing his poker glasses down in Miami, but I don't know if they read the situation and thought, no, we're not doing that. But they said no. And that would be that bridge deal, the 1-year ballooned offer that would give the Warriors 1 more year with Kuminga to figure things out. Is there any fit, any last-second ditch effort that Kuminga now fits into the role that Steve Kerr wants him to play? Kerr goes to management and says, he's good. We figured this out. Don't do anything. No trades. Kuminga's our guy. Maybe you get the chance of that. Very unlikely. But what it does is it then provides you a trade-friendly salary that can be matched, and it's much better than the qualifying offer, which we know has an October 1st deadline, which is coming up extremely soon. So, again, I don't know how Kuminga declines the offers that the Warriors toss his way, because there was one. Let's go with the other information, the other fact that I left out here. So basically the Warriors did, because Kuminga, he doesn't want that team option, right? He wants the player option, but it's not the player option that's holding him up, because you could probably just go less years, and I think that would be fine. So they said, all right, we'll go 3 years, but we'll give you $54 million fully guaranteed, which is an average of $18 million per season. And that is where Turner and Kuminga and the Kuminga camp said, nope, we're not doing that. Their willingness basically is $20 million per year. The team option deal should cost around $30 million per year, and that the Warriors have viewed the player option as a non-starter. So Kuminga, I said $20 million. They're not willing to dip down into the $20 million per year deal. It's $30 million per year. So that is where they came up with the alternative and said, why don't you just give us like a 1-year, $25 million deal? Basically, the balloon qualifying offer will get rid of things. We can all part, amicably at the deadline when he's going to be an expiring contract that's surely traded, because bird rights or whatever next offseason. Jonathan Kuminga, it would seem, is not coming back to the Bay Area, regardless of what happens. Any betting man, if that's offered on the FanDuel Sportsbook, smash the fact that he's not coming back to the Warriors. The question is, when is he leaving? There's still, a couple more weeks until that deadline. Do any more sign and trade offers come in? Do the Warriors explore a potential revisit, a call to Sacramento? BJ, what do you say you offer a second first-round pick, something that may entice the Warriors, but they were not interested in Malik Monk. They were not interested in that first-round pick that the Kings attached to it, and they were not interested in anything that the Phoenix Suns had to offer, and that's where we stand right now, where the Warriors are just like, here's our deal. And that's face-to-face. It's not easy to get face-to-face, so maybe Kuminga accepts that deal, and it's just lingering. If not, who knows what happens? I mean, would the Warriors come back with a 3-year, $65 million deal, which would put them at 22 and a half or 21 and a half, something along those lines per year, 3 years fully guaranteed? Kuminga thinks it's 30, or, meet in the middle for the fully guaranteed and no team option in there. I guess he'd probably meet in the middle 25, something. I don't know. I don't even know if it's a numbers game at this point. It goes back to the very beginning where Kuminga just sounds like he truly wants to be a part of the future, or at least a possibility. Because everyone knows, we all know, this is going nowhere between these two parties. First opportunity the Warriors have to trade him, they are going to trade him, or they will lose him for nothing. But there's under no circumstance going to be a scenario where in 2028, Jonathan Kuminga is leading the Golden State Warriors. If there is, that would be incredible, truly incredible. And I use that word lightly because I just think it's nearing the point of impossibility at this point that they could rectify that, and Kuminga's a mainstay. So he's got to turn into something. They have to figure out a deal. And as of right now, the Warriors have not figured out any sort of deal. Who truly has the leverage? We're going to talk about that, what Kuminga's greatest leverage is, and tie a ribbon on this newest development in the Jonathan Kuminga saga, which to me had a few wrinkles that were very important. One, he's communicating with his teammates. Two, he sat down face-to-face with Joe Lacob a month ago. And three, the most important, he was offered a deal, and the deal was still not good enough. And then they countered, Kuminga's camp countered with a deal that is kind of enticing. And the Warriors said, no, we don't want to lose you for nothing. But trading him at the deadline with like a $25 million expiring deal would be a very valuable chip to have. So I don't know. Does anyone know?
Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k or properties or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. Canceling those all can save you money every month. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
The place I want to start is appropriately enough with the starting five, because going into this season, we don't know what that starting five is going to look like. There are two. Well, one certainty is that Max Strus will not be in it on opening night, because we do know that he's ruled out for at least the first few months of the season because of a Jones fracture in his foot. And I would be surprised at this point if we saw him play for the Cavs prior to the calendar flipping to 2026. So we know he can be ruled out of the starting lineup at the start of the season. Darius Garland is a question mark. We don't know whether or not he's going to be available at the start of the season. We will find out. I don't think he should be available. I think it would be in the best interest of the Cavs and probably of Darius Garland as well to not be ready quite at the start of the regular season, take his time there, make sure he's better. But as I talk about this, I'm more so looking at this with the full season scope in mind. And with Max Strus out to start the season, I don't think it is a certainty that DeAndre Hunter is in the starting five. I do think, however, it would be the best thing for the Cavs. And I ultimately think that is the direction that Kenny Atkinson and the Cavs will go, is having DeAndre Hunter in that starting five, because I think that he is the guy that fits in the best. Now, the issue is, of course, that Darius Garland, if he's not available to start the season, the Cavs are not only going to have one new starter in DeAndre Hunter, who was not a starter very frequently last year. I have to go look up how many games he started with the Cavs. Obviously, it was not many. I know that he started his very first game against the Minnesota Timberwolves when he was first acquired via trade, but he only started 5 games for the Cavs last season of the 27 that he played. So he is what would be considered a newcomer to the starting 5. And having to do that isn't the most challenging thing in the world because there is some familiarity there. Having to insert him into the starting lineup while also potentially having a different starter in the backcourt alongside Donovan Mitchell could be a challenge, but I don't think that is some long-term issue because Darius Garland will be back sooner than later. Certainly, I think it's fair to assume that he'll be back before Max Strus will be back. But I do think DeAndre Hunter ultimately will be the starter to start the season. And the bold take here is that he is going to become the permanent starter, and it's going to be one of the best possible things for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, last year, I think one of the biggest criticisms I have of the way Kenny Atkinson handled the team after DeAndre Hunter was acquired in February is that Hunter really did not get a lot of run alongside the rest of the starting 5. So you take a look at Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen. DeAndre Hunter only played, according to Cleaning the Glass, 73 possessions alongside those 4 players during the regular season. I do not have the postseason numbers up in front of me, but during the regular season, he only played 73 possessions, which is not enough, right? Like you would expect him to play so much more alongside that group. And in the postseason, he only played 12 possessions. So it's not as if we know ultimately, at least firmly, what that looks like. Now, during the regular season, those numbers were very, very good in the 73 possessions. And of course, this is a very small sample size, and you have to keep in mind that it is a small sample size. But in the 73 possessions that he played with the rest of the starting 5, the Cavs outscored their opponents by 28.8 points per 100 possessions. That does mean, naturally, that they outscored their opponents by less than 28.8 points because they didn't reach that 100 possession mark, but they were very, very good. Yes, it was a very small sample size, but they had an offensive rating of 130.1 and a defensive rating of 101.4. Both numbers very, very, very good in ordinance with league average. And the other thing that this does, and the thing that actually I do think might be considered to be the most important part of this, is that DeAndre Hunter in that role is playing small forward. And he is, I think, much more of a natural small forward than he is a power forward. His size certainly suggests that, being listed at 6'8". And last year, after the trade, Hunter, again, this is according to Cleaning the Glass, Hunter played 385 possessions at small forward. The Cavs had a net rating of 12.5 while he was at small forward, which is a 96th percentile type thing in comparison to all the other 5-man lineups, like plus 12.5, 96th percentile for qualifying lineups, of course. So 385 possessions at small forward. DeAndre Hunter played, unfortunately, for the Cavs. And I say unfortunately as a relative term. Like, they were not bad, but they were better when he was playing small forward. When he played power forward, which was 1,015 possessions, the Cavs outscored their opponents by 9 points per 100 possessions. Still very good, but not quite that same elite number as what it is when he played small forward. So by having him in the starting 5, one, it puts him at what I think is his natural position much more frequently. This doesn't mean that he should never play power forward, because I do think there are lineups that make sense with him playing power forward. For instance, last year, the lineup of Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Max Strus, DeAndre Hunter, and Jared Allen outscored opponents by 10.4 points per 100 possessions in just under 100 possessions. So that was one of the really good ones. But when he played alongside Darius Garland, Ty Jerome, Max Strus, and Jared Allen, 90 possessions, the Cavs were outscored by 13 points per 100 possessions. There was not as much of a consistency, if you will, for the Cavs on the defensive end of the floor when Hunter was playing the power forward spot. And part of that is because DeAndre Hunter is just not a very good rebounder. That's why when he is playing the power forward spot, he's a little bit miscast. Now, the natural pushback from the Cavs is they don't necessarily believe in positions that way. Like the role is not all that different. And that might be true, but the personnel is different. And that matters so much because if DeAndre Hunter is not a great rebounder, and he's never proven to be a great rebounder, no matter where he's been in his career, if he's playing alongside both of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, it's not going to be that impactful. Like you're not going to notice the fact that, oh, the small forward, maybe not a great rebounder. But if he's playing power forward alongside only one of those guys, and both of those guys are good rebounders, but if he's playing alongside only one of those guys, the rebounding slack does need to be picked up somewhere else. And this is a roster for the Cavs that over the years has struggled to find rebounds away from the bigs. They've not necessarily had a really good, at least in the Donovan Mitchell era, so to speak. They've not really had a good smaller rebounder. Like Lamar Stevens kind of did it for a little while. And Max Strus, I do think, does it probably better than anybody else that the Cavs have on the wing, but they don't have reliable rebounders on the wing. They have naturally relied upon their big guys to handle that job. And that is, I guess, more their job than anybody else. But when you are also playing with we'll say 1.5 small guards, because I do to some extent agree with the way Kenny Atkinson terms things with Donovan Mitchell not being a small guard because his wingspan is so long. But you look at that and say, okay, well, Darius Garland is a small guard. So you're not going to expect a lot of rebounding from him. And the Cavs did that too with Ty Jerome last year, even though he was 6'5", he played like a little bit of a smaller guard. So they're looking for rebounding in different places. And locking DeAndre Hunter in as a starting small forward is going to mean that we should see, and yes, everything is a small sample size with him because he only played 27 games. But of his possessions, over 1,000 possessions for him of the 1,400-ish that he played in the regular season with the Cavs came at power forward. And I'm not saying that he should never play power forward because I don't think that should be true. I think there are certain lineups where it might make sense. And maybe with Lonzo Ball on the floor for the Cavs, and we will talk about him coming up in a minute too. But I do think that could maybe change some of the lineups. And I think Lonzo is a guy that is going to unlock a lot of things in terms of lineup flexibility for the Cavs.